Cool. Well, listen, hey, it's 2 minutes past 12, so we'll get going. And as ever, for the frequent flyers on this webinar series and for the new faces, thank you so much for setting aside half an hour to listen and talk about building better teams or team effectiveness, essentially. And I'm just going to let a few people in. There we go. So today we're talking about. We're talking about team operations. And if I can ask Zophie to let people in as they come on. So this is about team operations, and this is the part of team effectiveness that we all experience because we're actually in amongst it, aren't we? So let's have a look at this. And just the reminders that we give at the beginning of all these webinars is teams are not simple. They're complex adaptive systems, and they're a really messy place. And for those of you who've been in teams, and I guess for several decades, looking at some of the experienced faces on my screen, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. We talk about models and frameworks, and we're going to give you some insights and tips. But just as a reminder that models are not reality. They give us a window through which we can perhaps look into this messy space. So that's the just a bit of a qualification there. And I keep on emphasizing this, that trying to fix teams isn't about looking at behaviors. The behaviors, in a sense, are symptoms of wider environmental issues. And we'll get onto that more in a second. And this is the key point to take away. So we'll repeat this at the end. A poor team system stores up the stressors that prompt poor behaviors. Okay, so if you're not building the working environment in a way that helps people to perform as team colleagues, then you are going to get a whole range of behaviors that pop out of not attending to this, and that's really important. And this is just a reminder that the behaviors bit is really in the me part of this diagram, that I and us and it, the team, sit inside a business which sits within a wider context. So a lot of factors in play which create the mess. So that's the preamble. What we covered in the first webinar was about the context of the team, and that's really important. We then talked about the foundation. So we mentioned things like stakeholders, purpose, and safety and accountability. We then talked about aspirations. What kind of team do you need to become to serve the business fully? What does a development roadmap look like, etc. And today we're looking at operations, and then next month we're going to look at integrations. The idea that the team is not a self-licking lollipop, but it sits within a wider value chain across the organization. So there has to be cross-boundary impact to and from various teams. So operations. I'm going to share 3 models which give you a way of looking into and navigating the messy space. Now, this one here is like a very simple trellis. You can use it almost like an audit, and you can look at your team and think, right, are we clear on purpose? Have we got the right resources? How do we compensate people? How do we pay people? Who needs to be in the team? Who doesn't be in the team? So this is a really useful way of looking at the team that's beyond just let's all meet and let's make sure that we behave well. So this gives you an insight into that team environment. The next model, which we train or we help people with, is the entrepreneurial operating system. Again, similar in terms of it giving you a number of windows through which to look at the team. So obviously people having the right data on your scorecards, issues and risks, etc. So this is another, in fact, it's a really, really useful model to adopt for the organization as well as your team. It scales from team to organization. I'm going to use a very simple logical model here, and I'm just going to make the point that the talk today really is about focusing on a leadership team. However, a lot of this transfers to any sort of team, whether it's a product team, a project team, a program team. But the context I'm setting for this chat today is around a leadership team. So you can see the different layers there, and I'm just going to go through each of these layers and quickly talk about them, give you some examples, maybe talk about some client engagements we've had, which sort of highlight some of the challenges. So the other thing about this model is that you can see here, the skills and behaviors is the bit that we experience. Okay, so this is the bit we notice. And unfortunately, this is a place where a lot of teams and organizations spend a lot of money on psychometric tools or whatever and get people to come in and sort out behaviors. Now, as I said before, the behaviors are really important, but unless you're attending to the wider operating system, you are going to have problems. Okay, so all this wider operating system is the foundation of the behaviors you need for a high performing team. So looking at purpose and goals, and I just need to do some jiggery pokery over here. We dealt with this in the two webinars before. This is the essence of what your principal stakeholders require of the team. They are commissioning the team to do stuff, okay? If you're a scaling company, you won't have a board yet, perhaps, so you are your own making of your own purpose, and that's absolutely fine. And the purpose and goals is really about your commissioning stakeholders, helping you understand the value that they expect your team, whether it's a leadership team or whatever, to deliver. And some purposes are written in the context of the guiding principles or philosophy. The next bit is mandate, and this is perhaps for a team or an organization that's a bit more mature. So the mandate is given to the team. It's the source of the team's authority. So it may be the board, it could be investors, it could be both, obviously. If you don't have a board yet, then it's the law of the land. There's a number of legal expectations on the team and the organization, so this forms your mandate. And the thing about a mandate is that it specifies the things that are expected of you, but also there's a whole bunch of implied things that you perhaps need to get your head around. So there are some freedoms that you get with your purpose and your mandate, but clearly there's some boundaries and sanctions. Simple things like obviously the law, health and safety, and other compliance boundaries. But it's worth just understanding the size of your sandpit that you are being allowed to play in. And we used the sandpit metaphor a couple of sessions ago. Now, what if there is no mandate and you take over a team, a leadership team, and there's none of this in place? Well, very simply, you've got to grip it and draft these up, and it becomes a contract between you, essentially, and the board or whoever your commissioning stakeholders are. I've been in organizations where there's been a complete disconnect between the board, the leadership team, and the senior managers group, and things proceed quite well for a while, and then there's some moment where actually the lack of alignment becomes a real issue. And some people can lose their jobs over that. So it's just worth, the contracting word I've used there is not necessarily a contract, but it needs to be at least a conversation that is minuted so that everybody has a common understanding of the situation. Okay. Decision rights, really important. What decisions belong to this team? And this is a real place of dysfunction in many teams. You will get leadership teams who get so involved in the day-to-day running of contracts or issues, and managers become disempowered because the boss is in his in tray and is dealing with things. And of course, it's a mark of a well-managed scaling company where the boss or leadership team realize that their role is to create the future, to shape the future, build capability, and not necessarily to get stuck into implementation. So these are the three categories of decision rights. Big organizational decisions like big investments, strategy and direction, integration and capability building across the various silos in the organization, creating that ability of the teams to interlock, and stewardship, which is all about compliance, it's about risk management. It's about not spending more money than you've got debts, et cetera, et cetera. So basic stewardship. You might remember this from a previous webinar where this was the Institute of Directors diagram around what does a leadership team do, and we discussed that actually some leadership teams become involved in the present, in-year focus, looking inwards, whereas a more mature and higher functioning leadership team will look at building capability, setting direction, accountability to stakeholders, and doing collective organizational leadership. And this little diagram is such an eye-opener to some teams who are driven by people who feel more comfortable sorting out problems, because we all love to have our hair on fire and get extinguishers out and become heroes and sort stuff out, when actually trying to think 2-3 years ahead and shape the future is less public and less exciting, and people idolize you less. So this is a really important diagram and a point for team leaders to get hold of. Membership. We've been working with a leadership team of 16 people. Now, that doesn't work, okay, because it sacrifices pace and agility with everybody having to be part of the conversation, and the meetings take forever. And there's a hidden problem between about these big teams, and there's a thing called the in-group, out-group idea. And if you remember at school, teacher's pet, there were certain people who had the ear of the teacher or had the better conversations with the boss or the teacher. And then there were people who were left on the outside who maybe didn't get into those conversations. And over time, the people who are in the out group become disenfranchised, begin to lose commitment, and then start to talk behind people's backs. And you begin to get the whole thing unraveling. So hence my idea about the leadership team being as small as possible with absolutely the right people on board, so that everybody is in the in-group and you don't have this breakup of them and us, okay? So that's a key point. So keep the leadership team as small as possible. Co-opt other people into various meetings depending on the agenda, but you don't need them all to be part of the leadership team, being involved in those big discussions around capability, direction, etc. What a lot of organizations do is they have a small leadership team, and then they create a wider senior managers group who are charged with communicating ground truth from the front line, as it were, up to the leadership team, and downwards from the leadership team, they are the people who implement and make sure that stuff gets done. So that's the way around having, how big should my leadership team be? So think about having a senior managers group. Information. Darryl, I think when we spoke in the Caribbean, I think information management was a big thing, because there were so many moving parts. When organizations buy other businesses, you've got different systems and different ways of looking at information. So this is really critical. And I know, Alan, you're on the call here. You might want to add into this later on. But actually, minimizing the information you need to run the business, okay? What are the mission critical items that you want to include? And how do they relate to the purpose and the goals that your commissioning stakeholders have asked you to deliver on? There's also the idea of leading versus lag indicators. Are you basically correcting work that you've done in the past, or are you trying to shape the goals going forward? And it's maybe a mix of both. But there are some organizations that are basically measuring stuff they've done in the past, and don't have that kind of future drive. And obviously, risk and opportunity are part of the information landscape. And quite a lot of organizations are great at risk, but they don't consider, well, actually, if we had an opportunity mindset, how could we start to identify those opportunities, scope them up, and sort of go seize them? So risk and opportunity. Just a little rider here is the information you use. How do you qualify the quality of the information? How do you know that the information you're using is not just assumption, a bias, or someone's sloppy opinion? And the whole thing in the Middle East just now, the whole pretext of the campaign of launching that is based on lots of cultural differences and lots of assumptions, and the idea of a short campaign may not actually come to be because of all the other assumptions being made. So this is not to be politics, but this is just really around assumptions, bias, sloppy thinking, and facts. Somebody's microphone on because I've got a lot of corridor noise happening. Just give yourselves a quick check. Yeah, it's good. Okay. Ways of working. Key processes. What are the top processes that you need to attend to in the leadership team? So obviously, how do you make decisions? How do you deal with conflict? And how do you do planning? So be very clear about what are the key processes and document them and make sure everybody follows them. I'm working or I've just finished working with a client where the different parts of the organization have started to develop their own processes. And of course, the way the different parts of the business, ops, tech, sales, finance, they're not interlocking in the way that they could do. So by all means, change and develop the processes, but there needs to be a learning cycle within the team that says, right, how do we capture what's good and make sure everyone adopts it? So ways of working, we've kind of touched this on before. One thing that a lot of organizations don't attend to is the idea of reserved matters and delegations. So by reserved matters, what are the things that only we in this leadership team are authorized to make decisions on, and what can we delegate to others? And delegations could be in the form of a ceiling for spend. So it could be the next level down can spend up to, I don't know, $5 million or whatever. Beyond that, they need to ask for approval. So it's about creating a bit of rigor around who makes decisions and how resources are allocated. Escalation is really important. When something goes wrong, what things must we tell the leadership team? What things must we tell the board? So again, getting clear about those instances. Again, working with a colleague where everything goes to the managing director and he is getting inundated and he's going to get ill sooner rather than later. So there's no delegations or trust there. So that's an area that we're working on. So decision-making, we used this model before. This is the emergency services, and this came out of some of the disasters where the ambulance, fire, and police didn't coordinate together. People went to different places, and of course that made the situation worse. So they now have a combined decision model called the joint decision model. So this is just one way of having a repeatable approach to making decisions. So again, in your teams, do you have a common understanding of how decisions get made? Drumbeat or rhythm, people use different words. Again, we've had clients in the past where everything gets covered in meetings that are called sporadically by the boss. Okay, so there's no regular understanding that every Friday or every Monday or whatever it is that we meet and we must meet together. It's not about sending deputies or whatever. It's who are we in the team? We must meet together, and different agendas for different timeframes. So maybe, for example, weekly, let's get rid of the obstacles and issues. So let's keep this machine going. Monthly, maybe look at the performance dashboard and looking at the critical issues that are going to sort of stop you long term. And then quarterly, getting offsite and doing strategy and succession planning around key appointments. So, I mean, don't take this as the thing for you to do, but it's just the idea of different agendas, different meetings on a different frequency. Okay, so skills and behaviors. What skills and behaviors allow the team to function as a team rather than as a reporting forum for silos, where you get all those one-to-one conversations around the table? Everyone else is switched off. And I think last time I used the idea, everyone else is switched off and thinking about what's for tea, okay? So it's about how do we have collective conversations around the table? We talked about this last time. These are some of the rules or the codes of conduct that we want to maybe make sure that we're clear about. Disagree and commit was the Elon Musk thing, is that we can, no, it was Jeff Bezos thing, so that we can have a really good disagreement in the room, but when we walk out, the decision that we've collectively arrived at, this is what we communicate and this is what we execute on. Diktat, debate and dialogue. Some teams don't know how to talk with each other. Sometimes there's a very strong boss and it's diktat, do this, do that. For other conversations, it may be a debate around one or two or three options, and it becomes a very simple, inverted commas, voting exercise. Dialogue is more exploratory. It's about creating new knowledge and new insight around the table. And this may be something you would more likely do in one of your quarterly offsites. So understanding what this conversation in this meeting right now needs to be. Are we communicating at each other? Are we consulting, or are we into dialogue? Really important. And this, we talked about this before, is the behaviors. Some companies, like this company here, drew up a behavioral charter which drew from the values, and the green behaviors are the behaviors that we are going to promote when we come together. And these are the red behaviors that we're going to, red card, and we're going to call out amongst us as colleagues. So again, writing it down and having that kind of collective agreement around what's good and what's less good. Meetings, very briefly, meetings are generally really poorly convened, poorly chaired, and poorly followed up. Now, I don't know. I mean, I remember running meetings and thinking, gosh, that was a really good meeting. I got all my points across, okay? And that's really self-indulgent and really selfish, and it's not actually understanding how everybody else in the room went away. They went away thinking, gosh, that was a waste of my time. So paying attention to meetings is really important, because whatever we think of meetings, that's how stuff gets designed and ultimately delivered. So paying attention to how you commission them, the cadence, how you convene them, agendas with questions rather than just boring statements, how people commit and how they're communicated, and how people collaborate outside of the meetings to actually deliver the stuff that we've agreed on. And of course, all the good work happens outside of the meetings, but you need to have the meetings initially. So really, that's almost come to the end here. Just to remind, the key point to take away is the thing that we notice is the behaviors, because that's where we get offended, that's where we get space, that's where we get slowed down. But actually, the way we respond to those stresses bears attention to all those other parts of the design mix. So go beyond the behaviors and think, well, how am I, the leader, creating the conditions for success when we come together? So that's really important. So here's the so what. Fix the operating system first, not the people, okay? Don't blame the people. Think about the whole system. Invest in team effectiveness. Pay attention to those wider issues. Do stuff internally or bring in externals. Don't just look at individual leadership, okay? If you invest all your money just in investing leaders, you're going to get a bunch of prima donnas, perhaps, who don't know how to deal with the mess of team environments. So that's really passionate about that. Obviously, become the team your business deserves. That's what your board will want and your investors will want. So we've done the operations bit, literally a quick dash through the operations. Next time, it's integration. It's about the value chain of teams, 16th of April. I just want to do a quick plug about our Team Essentials program. We're running this around the UK, but it's a wider program than this. And I just want to highlight how we build this so that you can build your own programs with a similar sort of mindset. So look at the right-hand side of the screen. There's a bit of setting up. How do we get everybody on board? How do we align our expectations? So there's the online meeting, there's the questionnaire. There's then exploration, so it's kind of workshops, it's using workbooks, it's developing products for the team to take away. There's then the execution phase, because workshops can't stand alone because they're a waste of time. You've got to draw them through into the workplace. So execution, there's then holding to account. So we build in a holding to account to make sure teams have done what they promised to each other they would do. And then there's continuous professional development. So in this case, membership of the Institute of Leadership. So there's a logic to why we do this. And when you do this with your people, make sure that you just don't have a one-off event and think things will change. You've got to set it up. You've got to do the thing. You've got to do more stuff in the workplace. You've got to do some holding to account, and you've got to continue the motion beyond that. So there we go. Questions from anybody? hopefully that was not too bish bosh bash and too rapid, but the key point is it's not just about the behaviors, it's about the working environment.